Well, it's my pleasure to speak with Melissa and Nina. Welcome to our panel discussion here. Melissa is a former behavioral health startup founder, psychotherapist, and the chief product officer at Ellipsis Health. Thanks for being here. And Nina is the director of client services at Ellipsis Health. She has a master's of public health and is also the former coordinator of the Women's Health Tech Initiative at HITLAB. So welcome back. Ellipsis Health is a healthcare technology company that has developed an AI-generated vocal biomarker technology that uses voice for earlier and better identification, assessment, and monitoring of clinical anxiety and depression. So to start, what are some of the common mental health disorders that disproportionately affect women, and how do factors like biological differences and stages of life contribute to these disparities? And we'll start with you, Melissa.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Riley, for inviting me and Nina to be here with HITLAB. It was so interesting hearing from Ebony, and I learned a lot about that. And one of the things I know Ebony talked about is, mental health is a societal issue, but it's also something that very much impacts women's health. And interestingly, women are twice as likely to experience depression and anxiety as men, and 10 times more likely to be impacted by eating disorders. And they also experience PTSD and stress-related issues more than men. If you look at like a woman's lifetime, there are different points and inflection points at which women are more likely to struggle with mental health issues, starting in adolescence. And going into like the peripartum time when women are pregnant and postpartum. And postpartum depression and peripartum is something that Ellipsis Health, we're very passionate about. Women are struggling often with anxiety and depression. And we know that's such an important period of life because when women have depression and anxiety, they're less likely to bond with their babies. And it's a very, very stressful time where you're not getting much sleep. We also know it's really hard to identify people. Right now, currently, women will go through and they'll answer questionnaires, but often we don't want to answer those questionnaires. And that's something where Ellipsis Health, we're really using vocal biomarkers, able to help people who are maybe struggling to raise their hand that they're suffering. The other really interesting period of life that women experience is the peripartum or the perimenopause and menopause period. I know that there are companies now who are focusing on that, but that's pretty recent. And women experience a lot of different symptoms during that time. If you talk to any woman over the age of 45, ask her how she's sleeping. There's like the 3 a.m. club where women wake up and then you're not able to sleep, so it's hard to concentrate. You're more likely to be irritable, mood issues. And what I found is that doctors often don't necessarily focus or know a lot about that period of time. They're just like, well, it is what it is. So women are often left to sort of try to figure out what's causing what. And I think that can create a lot of, mental health issues during that time. Nina, is there anything you want to add?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for HITLAB for putting this event together that focuses on the mind and body connection. It's exciting to see that healthcare organizations are not only acknowledging this connection and centering women in the discussion, but they're really prioritizing supporting mental and physical health. And so we as leaders in the space have this amazing opportunity to not only support the mental and physical health of women, but because women are the center of their households, we can support children and families and the broader communities. So we're in a really exciting space and time. And as Melissa just mentioned, there are many different phases of the life course where we see the interplay between mental and physical health for women. But I just wanted to focus on, for right now, the reproductive age, because you can really see how mental and physical health interact. They have this bilateral relationship. So pregnant people experiencing mental health issues are at a 50% greater risk of giving preterm birth, with worse health outcomes for mom and baby. And 10 to 15% of women experience postpartum depression. not to mention postpartum anxiety, which is largely ignored. And in California, where Melissa and I live, perinatal depression affects 1 in 5 women or 100,000 people per year. And this has a serious human cost, but it also has an economic cost, and that's $2.25 billion per year. So it's unacceptable, and it's a huge problem that we're solving for.
Wow, thank you for sharing those data points, touching on the biological factors. But we know that maybe that's not the only thing at play here when we're dealing with the health disparities and health and mental health outcomes for women. So how do societal expectations and gender norms impact women's mental health experiences, and what challenges do women face in seeking support for their mental well-being? And Nina, we'll start with you.
Sure. So something that we think a lot about at Ellipsis Health and in public health practice is the impact of stigma and misconceptions around mental health. There have been many movements in the last, I'd say, decade that have really brought awareness to mental health. I would say with Gen Z, celebrities, millennials, and the rise of social media have really helped reduce the stigma around mental health. But it's still pervasive. There are some people, like older generations, have a harder time raising their hands for help. Some cultures have a harder time asking for help, and definitely stigma exists in some professions more than others, and healthcare is one of them. And in prepping for this panel, I was surprised to learn that there was a 2018 study of 1,000 participants. And that study found that 31% of people expressed the belief that a weak personality leads to depression. That means that stigma is still a huge barrier in allowing people to access the help that they really desperately need. And it also highlights that people are not only hesitant to raise their hands and disclose their symptoms of depression to a healthcare worker, but they're also afraid to acknowledge it or are reluctant to acknowledge it within themselves. And that's why new and improved screening tools are really exciting and important to advance the field forward. But quickly bringing it back to women and how do stigma and social factors uniquely affect them. Just a few data points here. Exposure to violence, for example, makes a woman 3 to 4 times more likely to be affected by depression. And stigma of seeking treatment for a mental illness is greater among women of color. So it really does uniquely affect women. And I'll kick it over to Melissa to share her thoughts.
I think you're right. Absolutely, Nina. I think the biggest barrier to people getting help for mental health issues is this internal barrier that something's wrong with me. And I think when you're going through it, there's sort of a fog. And that is something that I've noticed as a therapist, that we force people to overcome that barrier as opposed to normalizing it. This happens. I actually think that it's easier for women to seek mental health help. And actually, I think the data supports that women are more likely to seek help than men are. And actually, women have more support around them. They're more likely to have close friends and a community of people around them. So I think in that way, it's more helpful for women. One thing I want to point out, though, is society, that I think it's important to focus on, or at least highlight, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't highlight, is the mental health impact that has happened over the last few years in light of Roe v. Wade being dismantled. And there's some research that came out late last year that shows that there are higher rates of emotional distress, anxiety, and depression among childbearing age women in the states where these laws have been repealed. And so we all know physical and mental are combined, but I think when reproductive rights are being impacted, that absolutely impacts mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great piece to end on. And I will say that with all of the technology on our phones that are giving us stress and anxiety, it's nice to know that you two are developing a technology that can help deal with some of those issues. So thank you again so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights, and we hope to get you back on the program again.
Thanks so much.